If the Dark Masters from Digimon had, as they very nearly did in canon, won their day against the original Digidestined, both the digital world and the human world would likely descend into tyranny and chaos, the likes of which the canon timeline could only lightly conceive of. While simultaneously, this would also present the anime staff with free reign to lean a lot further into some of the more intense things explored in the original Digimon Adventure. The far darker tones and themes of Adventure 02 touched on with the concepts like the Dark Ocean, Digimon Emperor, and Oikawa, as the admittedly clunkily revealed, yet still compelling main villain of the series, which would in turn probably allow a story like this to address some of those issues fans commonly cite with 02's story/villain progression. At the same time, this would also likely mean delving into some of the dark things presented in Tamers or Ghost Game as well. The way I would go about this is by trying not to disturb as much of what the original Season 2 writers presented us with, as best I can. However, at the same time, that makes me wonder if anyone would be interested in seeing me try to rewrite a season of Digimon in general. For instance, aside from TK and Kari, I would certainly still use Davis, Ken, Yoli, and Cody. TK and Kari could still play multiple extremely interesting roles in the story, but when thinking of this concept, one kind of assumes at least Patamon and Gatomon are lost in the battle with the Dark Masters, but we'd likely be swapping the partners of the other 4 Digidestined as well, at least slightly, even if some of these changes would conflict with the Digimon which were released at the time, and the team color scheme would admittedly be a bit flat at first, but I think that could tie into the story. As the two worlds are merging, black Digimon variants are turning up more and more, and are known to be far more dangerous and powerful than their regular colored variants. However, despite this rumor, this group of Digidestined are all partnered with black Digimon. And more interestingly, when their bonds deepen and strengthen to unlock new forms through Digivolution, the Digimon achieve states where they reclaim their rightful colors. Even so, these Digidestined must hold even firmer than their predecessors, as if their hearts give in to despair or corruption even a bit, their Digimon too will be corrupted 100-fold. I could also easily see the story twisting and changing or expanding on things we didn't get to originally, like Dagomon of the Dark Ocean becoming a major player in the story, and Oikawa becoming an earlier redeemed mentor figure to the new cast, much like the role Janai once played. In this timeline, as it's meant to be more of a continuation and wrap-up of the original adventure, the Dark Master's machinations may not limit the ability of the Digidestined Digimon to digivolve naturally at first. But that concept, combined with the possibility for lots of new custom armor or Jagras evolutions, makes this another one of those what-if SuperMini ideas that may need more than a short to really cook to perfection. But you be the judge. I'm aware some villain victory stories can be a bit hit or miss, but I find a lot of morbid curiosity in the question of, if Ash Ketchum and Gary Oak had Digimon partners and thus became Digimon tamers rather than Pokemon trainers, I think it would be an interesting exercise in either attempting to figure out a line of official Digimon from start at the Baby 1 level to finish at the Mega Plus level, or going more the route of making your own fake or fan-made Digimon from the ground up. Personally, I think as Ash and Gary are represented by too many Pokemon to confidently and comfortably have a representative for each on their teams, even if we went more video game style and allowed them to be tamers of multiple Digimon at once rather than having a core part. Think of something like applying the style of new recolors and lore to a Digimon in order to help it fit into a slot, or simply commissioning art to get brand new Digimon made, sort of like a Numa 282 or Carney X video. Or, for the sake of an actual story for this concept, think of Pickle Dill's outline and premise for how they would have executed that Ash and Digimon story, as my real only issue with that video remains to be that the original adventure partners were just ported over to the new Tamers. And hey, maybe if this is popular enough, I can make this into a brand new What If miniseries, figuring out Digimon partners and lines for other named characters standing in as Digidestined and antagonists from that video, and just the wider series of Pokemon, and then reverse it with a series of designing Pokemon teams for Digimon Tamers. Let's start with Ash. While the original inclination is to certainly stick him with the classic rookie Digimon partner Agumon, as many would just consider him the Pikachu of the Digimon world, this is incorrect in my eyes, as Agumon and the Greymon family are much closer and more analogous to being the Charizard of the Digimon world on account of its many variants and the love the franchise just seems to have for it as a whole. One could also use Postmon as a Pikachu stand-in, but it is such a unique Digimon that I don't find it the best fit person. Thus, I suggest using the real Digimon version of Pikachu, Elecmon, as you could use either the regular version or Elecmon Violet, as they'd also match Ash's usual color scheme, or even his Diamond and Pearl yellow and black colors. Next, despite what I just said, I would make the champion form represent Charizard, but to do it, I would instead make use of Flare Lizamon, as it's always struck me as having an Ash vibe to it. From there, the line's ultimate form will represent another of Ash's stronger aces than Greninja, using a Fumamon recolor we'll call Gekkogamon. And funnily enough, Omega to me is hardest to figure out for Ash, as I could see going with something like a Volcanusmon to reference the creation of Pokeball, or maybe because of some recency bias with Time Stranger, going with a Jupitermon recolor or variant we could call something like Mastermon, just meant to represent that pinnacle of being a Pokemon master that Ash strived for. Gary, though, is easier, I think. First, giving him a variant of Gazimon is a reference to his Eevee, something we could maybe call Shinkamon, that could evolve into a champion form referencing his Arcanine, which would be formed from a Gerudo, Gauga, Fang, or maybe even something like a Flaremon variant. Changing up a bit, I think his ultimate reference is Electivire, maybe with something like a variant of Great Grizzlymon that uses lightning rather than fire. And finally, referencing Gary's first Pokemon in his Blastoise, there would be no better candidate than a Jumbo Gamemon variant named Blast Gamemon. But what do you think? What Digimon lines do you feel will fit these characters best, and why? Since the dubbing of Season 4 is likely not going to happen for the anime's 20th anniversary, let's ask the question of if Yu-Gi-Oh! GX got a Season 5 instead. First and foremost, I think it could resolve lingering storylines, deepen character arcs, and explore new challenges. Like for instance, we could easily have the story start after the events of Bonds Beyond Time, and tie in a 6th season of 5Ds at the same time, as that would in the process give us more of the journey around the world Jaden was going on alongside Yubel, Pharaoh, and Banner. Well, had we gotten a 5th season originally, it would have probably given the original Japanese version of the anime enough time to run a bit longer, which would have allowed 4Kids to catch up and dub Season 4. And then Season 5 hopefully wouldn't go the way of Season 4 and would still get dubbed itself. In the process, making it so they weren't so far behind and working in crunch time when it came time to adapt the final seasons of 5Ds and Zexal as well. Granted, the extent of some of my ideas will be exploring the dual careers of recent graduates some more and debuting newer monsters and cards which weren't around during the original making of GX. My concepts for this idea are a tad limited, and I'll admit that, as I'm still just a bit sad the 20th anniversary of GX isn't going to be a bigger deal. However, as a massive fan of the series, and someone who identifies with it almost more than any other season of Yu-Gi-Oh!, since it was the one to hit me when I was just the right age, I do hope the remaster we're going to get is done as well as it can be. And if nothing else, I'm excited to have an excuse to go back and rewatch GX, as well as discuss it with friends in my community. But how do you feel about the news? If Toguro had stayed with Genkai, the simple choice to remain with his true love instead of succumbing to his desire for ultimate strength would drastically alter not only his and Genkai's lives, but also the events of Yu Yu Hakusho as a whole, turning their story into one of perseverance, redemption, and partnership, rather than just one of tragedy and vengeance. The diverging point would therefore be at the brutal massacre of their dojo by demons, when Toguro was offered the chance to gain overwhelming power by trading his humanity. However, here in this timeline, Genkai's heartfelt pleas convinces him that strength without purpose is hollow. Moved by profound yet simple words, Toguro refuses the offer, deciding to heal and rebuild alongside Genkai, and in the process, likely unlocking a greater spiritual power alongside her, filled with their love and determination. Without the darkness and sheer single-minded ruthlessness of his transformation, Toguro will remain a simple martial artist, powerful and well-grounded, as well as dedicated to protecting the living world, facing his guilt, and getting stronger through training alongside Genkai, in order to become even more legendary as fighters and mentors, as they not only rebuild their dojo, but probably even go on to marry, start a family. There is also a very high likelihood that with a good Toguro and a more optimistic and active Genkai, the Chapter Black saga could be prevented. Koenma could recruit Toguro as well, as a senior advisor, or protector for spirit world affairs, which means Toguro could be the one to identify Shinobu Sensui's growing instability earlier, possibly intervening before he starts his apocalyptic plan, and more importantly, stepping in to comfort and counsel him that the actions of a few scumbag humans don't define all of them, any more than bad demons define all demons, hopefully saving the other spirit detective from nihilism and despair as a mentor and counterbalance with a healthy view of the duality of good and evil. At the same time, Toguro might also replace Yusuke's role as Sensui's main opponent, seeing their confrontation as the battle of ideologies, far before what happened in canon. Finally, when Yusuke and his spirit detective team eventually comes into the picture, the dynamic of the story shifts even more significant, as Yusuke's training will become even more intense and effective with Genkai and Toguro teaching him from the start, seeing him learn discipline and restraint, alongside honing his spiritual energy, which will prepare him far better for the Three Kings arc. Meanwhile, for the rest of Team Urameshi, Kuwabara would see Toguro as a role model, balancing strength and kindness, and as a result, would likely never retire, instead continuing his journey to grow stronger as he deepens his studies. And as it would just ring as a funny coincidence throughout the multiverse, I think this version of Kuwabara would go on to be one of Toguro's favorite and most powerful students, while Hiei would eventually come to respect Toguro's rejection of power at the cost of humanity and kindness, and Kurama would appreciate Toguro's wisdom, drawing parallels to his own struggles with his demon past. Finally, at the Dark Tournament, it would likely still happen, but without his iconic and main villain, it would still need a main villain with some pretty serious chops, willing to stand up against an even stronger Team Urameshi, with Toguro and Genkai backing them this time. Since overall, this would probably be an idealized timeline, but what do you think of if Iruka Umino, that's generally one of the kindest and most grounding figures in the entirety of Konoha, got a chance to hit the reset button, and thus was reborn with all his memories and power? It would have the capability to be one of the most exciting and engaging takes on this type of what if for the Naruto story due to the sheer potential it has to reshape the canon, especially in retrospect, as I near the end of this series. Very much in the vein of something like reincarnated as Yamcha, Iruka is far from the most special person to give a chance like this to. He doesn't have the strength of a Hashirama, or the dojutsu of a Kakashi, or an elite way to train himself at a high speed with shadow clones, or a godly technique a la Naruto and Boruto, meaning he wouldn't have the easiest means to change things. He knows, especially right off the bat, he can't reasonably just punch every villain in the face and end things there, even if he does get as strong as he possibly could. Beyond that, his Talk no Jutsu still wouldn't be as good as Naruto's. So I think very quickly, he would recognize that to become the linchpin he needs to be, he does need to seriously push past his past life potential to the absolute limit, evolving his niche talents for sensory, sealing, and barrier ninjutsu rather than outright combat at first. This dedicated focus would transform him into a major asset, not one to be protected, well before the Nine Tails attack even begins. His first imperative is preventing the tragic day of Naruto's birth and all the casualties that occurred on. Through diligent years-long preparation, he could deploy an incredibly powerful barrier ninjutsu jutsu during the attack on Konoha. As a result, this desperate strategic bid would secure the immediate area around Kushina and where the Nine Tails begins to rampage, helping Iruka to save the lives of one or maybe even both his parents alongside many others, if only by just buying a bit of time and bolstering the defenses, like preparing a great deal of the Leaf Village residents to help with his string-like formation seal. So through these actions, he ensures the Umino clan does not suffer the fate of his previous life, but the greatest change he makes is to Naruto himself. Because if Kushina and Minato are still lost, and because he's still possessing that bomb of the Jinchuriki from his previous life, Iruka, likely now being held a hero, would advocate for the Umino clan to take care of the boy, formally adopting him as a younger brother, and giving Naruto two veteran shinobi as adoptive parents. In the process, that single foundational act would give Naruto a loving family, a robust support system, and the confidence and guidance from the start that the original character was cruelly denied, meaning Naruto too gets a better head start and environment than he usually does, even in these idealistic scenarios. And that's because Iruka's changes are strategic and village-wide, making him something like an intelligence operative ninja, rather than just the simple support scout he was in his first. He doesn't retire to the classroom. Instead, he uses the academy not as a safe haven, but as a strategic base to get stronger, reforming the education and training system, and exposing traitors like Mizuki years earlier, or possibly reforming and making them better as well. The key outcome is that a strategically placed Iruka ensures every member of his former class is better mentored and equipped, meaning the entire Konoha 11 enter the story better, stronger, and more ideally prepared. Also maybe closer, since as a better teacher, Iruka could foster a stronger bond between them all. Alongside his much greater worth as a still active ninja and teacher, this Iruka would quickly become an invaluable high-level aide to the third Hokage, with his own barrier skills potentially preventing Saritobi's death during the Leaf Crush. Should the third retire or fall, I believe that with this second lifetime of diligent training, Iruka Umino is the perfect choice to become Lord 5th Hokage, one of the most level-headed and stable leaders the village has ever seen. If Launch had joined the Crane School, it would require her to have been picked up and trained long before ever becoming an ally of the Turtle School. This would likely be done as part of one of her blonde-haired form's crime sprees, with either Master Shin hearing and being intrigued about this, and feeling she would perfectly embody the school's ruthless ideals, or possibly a case in which Tao Pai Pai is being hired to track her down and take her out, only to instead see a potential pupil due to having the Crane School's hallmark of abnormal anatomy. Case in point, Tien's being a Triclops and Chaozu a hopping vampire. Either way, blonde Launch would likely show little interest initially in all the rules and spiritual mumbo-jumbo that comes with being a martial artist, just as she didn't engage much with the Turtle School. However, upon seeing how much money Tao makes as a mercenary and hitman, compared to the risky life of a bank robber, she would eventually find her place. Not to mention, if she does stay, there's some three-eyed eye candy to watch during his daily drills. Speaking of Tien, she would still develop her canonical interest in him, and while normally he would show no romantic interest in her, here, she would have gained much of his attention as a fellow student of the Crane School, and one his two mentors would likely instruct him to get up to snuff personally, with this being an enticing prospect. As with Launch's personality and potential, the Triclops may earn a true worthy rival years before meeting Son Goku, and this would in turn make him even stronger as a martial artist. This could also possibly see Tien loosen up and see things blonde Launch's way, which could in turn make him all the more of a bad guy himself in the process. Since while Chaozu is his best friend, the little guy doesn't make much of a sparring partner, while here, he would have appeared to drive him to new heights constantly, and one he really wants to impress at that, while in turn, she would also grow even more formidable. As part of this, Launch would gain proficiency with all the Crane School techniques, though she would have very little time for the Tri-Beam, as what's the good of learning an attack that uses up your life force? Meaning even if you win, you die. That's a mug's game. In contrast, the Dodon Ray would be perfect for hitting targets too far away for her guns, while best of all would be the sky dancing technique, better known as Ki-empowered flight, as it will be incredibly useful for some bank robbing on the side, as she can just swoop down and then fly off with her ill-gotten gains unimpeded. However, life would not be all training and heists, as upon learning that his old rival had students entering the World Martial Arts Tournament, Shin would enter Tien, Chaozu, and Launch, with them all proving strong rivals to the Turtle School. That is, until Launch sneezes and loses all her fighting spirit, along with her memories of her training. Or alternatively, another way this story could go is Master Shin getting word of the new Turtle School students early, and having Launch go undercover to pretty much play her canon role, but here with the goal of infiltrating and destroying the Turtle School, Roshi, and his students by exploiting his weakness for peppy gals. At first glance, it may seem like just a shipping what if, but I can't seem to forget about all the fun outcomes that could pop up like a sudden and surprising sneezing fit. If Hayate Gecko, and likely for the sake of general purposes, Yugao Uzuki as well while we're at it, were reborn with all their memories and powers, I think it could make for another sleeper hit of these reincarnated Naruto character stories, with some very interesting character and lore exploration opportunities that would go a bit beyond just looking at cool stuff they could do by expanding on their powers and abilities from their old lives. For example, Hayate and Yugao have a true partnership in both life and combat, and despite Naruto actually being one of the arguably most romance and shipping heavy shonen battle manga there is, the series doesn't spend a lot of time showing what it's like for ninja to be bonded by love and carnal desire. Aside from if you're a Naruto and Sasuke shipper, in that case you're actually doing pretty good. So with this scenario and its built-in tragic star-crossed lovers getting a second chance theming, you could get a decent bit of mileage and sweet fluff out of it. Beyond this, lore-wise, this scenario intrigues me because it's another one of those where the character knows just enough to make an intriguing set of changes or challenges to shift the timeline, but they don't know so much that it would be exceedingly easy for them to just change history however they see fit. Not to mention, Hayate and Yugao have cool abilities, but nothing really overtly story-breaking, meaning there would be some genuine interest in watching them grind and work to grow over time with their second lives while trying to better protect Konoha and each other this time. Imagine Hayate trying to pull off shadow clone training, or Yugao trying to use medical ninjutsu to help Hayate stay healthy. Or Hayate himself, for example, could possibly do something in this lifetime to alleviate his own chronic illness, which alone could just make him a lot stronger. Beyond this, I could also definitely see him further honing the kenjutsu skills that earned him the title of Tokubetsu Jonin and the recognition of Anbu, making it wholly possible that Hayate of this timeline would have a higher rank to match his increased power. Aside from this, with Hayate's original sacrifice in the line of duty, and how focused he is, I think he'd endeavor to be the strategist and brains behind their operation, while Yugao becomes the enforcer, using her elite Anbu and kenjutsu training to push herself farther beyond alongside Hayate, while also further developing her talent for sealing jutsu. From here, the duo would have a great deal of time to make preparations to change the course of Konoha history, like when it comes to the Nine Tails attack or the Uchiha massacre, but especially for events later in the timeline like the Leaf Crush or the Edo Tensei army of the Fourth Ninja War, meaning this likely healthier and stronger Hayate is more prepared to take on and likely defeat Baki of the Sand, taking him in and forcing him to explode the Leaf Crush pan himself, while getting help from people like Anko or Kakashi to set up ambushes for Kabuto, and then present their findings to the Hokage, likely exposing Orochimaru and Danzo in the process. Thus, with exploits like single-handedly stopping multiple conspiracies, Yugao and Hayate would both receive more recognition and clout in the village, giving them the pull to reform and overhaul the Anbu, and also taking a hand in mentoring the next generation to prepare them to prevent the war as well, as by this point, they would be strong candidates to be the next Hokage couple. And while I have an extra 30 seconds, I just want to mention Baki Reborn would also be a pretty cool one, since he could change Saiyan history a lot, intercepting Orochimaru, warning Rasa, and being a better mentor and member of the community to Gaara. I usually assume my only way to explore Baki would be a story where Naruto is raised as a ninja around Gaara, but this and the Hayate route would also offer some pretty interesting options as well to look into. If Raditz ran away to Earth, likely as a result of Vegeta and Nappa's mistreatment, he could potentially be a valuable ally to Goku and his friends during OG Dragon Ball, or he could be a more dangerous scourge than any they were meant to face at that time in canon. Admittedly, he would at first seem like just another villain, as even if he did help defeat someone like Pilaf, the Red Ribbon Army, or King Piccolo, it would be with the intent to rule over the planet himself, due to his might makes right Saiyan mentality. Fortunately, upon meeting Goku and being reminded of their mother's kindness through the younger boy's kind nature, and the influence of a mysterious adopted grandfather figure, he may eventually come around to his ways, especially if this Earth place keeps offering him yummy food and fun adventures whenever he decides to save it and Kakarot from the piddly little villains that keep coming up every few years, due to not summoning Vegeta and Nappa. On top of changing the full course of Dragon Ball already, the entire Saiyan and Frieza sagas would be averted, meaning the first major threats would come in the form of the androids, who would be heralded by either a future Trunks who is the son of Raditz and Bulma, or a future version of Bulma herself. This would give the Saiyan brothers plenty of motivation to train, with it likely being here that one or both of them attain Super Saiyan after witnessing the death of a friend at the hands of the androids, or even Cell, before training in the hyperbolic time chamber, either together or separately, with whoever goes first then killing semi-perfect Cell, and averting the Cell games as well. Though it's still entirely possible that Raditz's tendency to make mistakes wouldn't be all gone from him just yet, and if not from him, Goku certainly could have taken some influence from his brother in overconfidence, which could in turn still see him making his mistakes as well, as I just don't think that Raditz's presence alone is enough to make Goku and the Z-Fighters hyper-competent, or any more lucky than they already are. Though if it does, from here the Buu Saga would also be something of a cakewalk, as due to training together for 7 more years, Goku, Raditz, and possibly their kids would have acquired and mastered Super Saiyan 2, meaning when they need to confront Babidi, they can dogwalk his minions, including Dabura, and end the threat of Buu before it even begins, allowing them to settle back into peacetime once again. That is until the arrival of Beerus. Though from there, this what-if story might resemble Super's actual canon far too closely. And even then, it would be retreading and rehashing a bit of content and theme from another pretty popular story you might know from me. Though that still doesn't make it any less interesting to ask the question of what would happen if Sai was reborn with all his memories and power, would in my eyes not only be pretty uniquely interesting among these stories in its own right, but also a chance to address the fact that despite having possibly one of my favorite power sets in the Naruto franchise, I very often forget about Sai. Aside from this, Sai is also one of the most spy and espionage/sabotage coded ninja in the verse, and he's also uniquely one of the only ones aside from maybe Sasuke who has lived up until the modern-day 2 Blue Vortex era, meaning he is armed with knowledge of all major threats, from Danzo to the Otsutsuki, and the catastrophic power of omnipotence to at least some degree. Thus, his goal is no longer to just save Konoha, but to prevent the collapse of the entire world order. Using a mature mind with elite Anbu skills and future knowledge, now inhabiting the body of an orphan child within the League. His first priorities would obviously be to expose Danzo and the operations of Root, as well as hopefully saving his adopted brother Shin. And now already having mastered the grueling training he was forced through once, Sai could now coast through it again, and instead use the time and his superb stealth skills to do his best to ease the danger of the training for Shin and the other students, as well as hopefully building the ranks for his rebellion by getting stronger and evolving his own abilities with the experience of his past life, like for example, adapting some of Energy's colorful beast mimicry techniques, and simultaneously expanding the bounds of what he can draw and emulate or animate. For instance, creating false tongues that could be hidden in the mouths of Sai and his fellow Root members, allowing them to pretend they have been marked with the cursed tongue eradication seal that silences them about the organization, and essentially turning them all into long-term moles. All of them thankful and loyal to Sai, and adding to the eyes and ears of his own intelligence network within Root, bent on its sabotage and destruction, as leaking all of this to the third Hokage would become infinitely easier and more believable, as it now isn't coming from just one weirdly genius and strong kid who seems to know about the future. An earlier disbanded Root and the removal of Danzo's influence also would mean that Sai could probably do whatever was necessary to secure Shin basic or even high-grade medical care, making it viable that his life is saved, and thus, it's almost like allowing a what if Shin was reborn or survived subplot in the story. This also pretty heavily impacts Naruto's upbringing in the village, since there would be no leak of his Jinchuriki status. But this especially changes Sasuke's lot, since the Uchiha massacre is more than likely averted completely, and the clan's connection with the village is strengthened as Danzo is exposed. All the meddling kids that did it like Sai are held as heroes and prodigies, not to mention in goodwill for their heroics in saving the clan and village from needless bloodshed, as well as to bolster the numbers and the perception of the clan. The Uchiha could also adopt or honorarily induct Sai, Shin, and their Root destruction network into the clan, essentially giving a way to make Sai fittingly a part of a stable, loyal, and highly analytical major Konoha clan, and Sasuke's adopted cousin, further balancing him out and averting his and Itachi's darker fates. We could also therefore see a stronger Team 7, with Sai remaining an honorary member and dedicated support. That's all the reduced casualties and increased village unity means better preparation for the future threats. This would also just be cool since it would by marriage connect Ino, Sakura, Sarada, and Inojin as part of the same clan. Plus, things like Pain's invasion is just less destructive, since Root agents are defending the Leaf instead of sabotaging it. From there, due to Sai, the Fourth Great Ninja War begins with stronger intelligence and earlier preparation against Obito and the Akatsuki, with this trend continuing on against the Otsutsuki and even the godly powers of Shinjutsu, thus making our main character here unforgettable. But this was only a single brushstroke of the story of if Goten and Trunks fused with Gamma's number 1 and 2, we likely would have seen a brand new style of fusion / transformation, or rather henshin we'd never seen before in Dragon Ball. Furthermore, a new status quo changing power greater than that of Orange Piccolo and Beast Gohan could have easily been found as well, thanks to the raw potential of the two halves of Gotenks being combined with the power of the Gammas. Since in both the film and manga versions of Superhero, they both boasted some of the most impressive feats, especially against Cell Max. This could come about via the manga interpretation of events mostly, where we have the use of the Saiyaman X1 and X2 personas as major inspirations of Dr. Hedo, to the point of being described as their progenitors when the Gammas encountered them in their costumes, since it should be kept in mind that the twisted super evil genius of Dr. Gero also built in certain aspects of his creations with the idea of full operation / power output and efficiency commonly not being possible, at least not without some kind of biological component attached to it or based around the android in question. For example, the cyborgs and his ultimate creation of the bioandroid Cell, since they are and were commonly shown to have the most potential for growth and immediate power output, while fully mechanical models, while still strong, were more advantageous for their obedience. Thus, in this verse, when commissioned by Magenta, a slightly more wily Hedo just takes that knowledge of his grandfather into account when he's asked to make Cell Max, since in canon, he already went to the trouble of making and programming heroics into the Gammas, so an extra precaution for the greater good would also not be out of character. Thus, as an extra failsafe, if Cell Max or anything else looks like it could defeat the Gammas, or even Saiyaman X1 and X2 as their powers was his muse, then the Gammas will fuse with the tech that allows Goten and Trunks to transform into their superhero personas, morphing them into a mightier form through a simple costume change. Since while not extremely common, we do have the precedent of things like King Kai's magic materialization, making Goku a new Gi strong enough to defend from weak attacks on his own. Or you could go with something like my own headcanon, that in exchange for the drop in speed and power used used to equip weighted clothing, a fighter's current durability would increase slightly over what their natural defenses allow. But in this case, it will be a lot more of a power-up in the vein of Cell or Super 17. They'll think more about concepts like symbiote costumes from Marvel, or the Goku uniforms from Kill la Kill, a kind of living parasitic clothing that enhances the user, and this would just be done to the ultimate extent of that idea in the Dragon Ball verse, offering Goten and Trunks full-on tokusatsu power the likes of which Gohan and the Ginyu Force have only ever dreamed of. The catch, of course, being that they have to properly sync up and pose to activate this power. And of course, their attack names have to be extra cool and flashy, or else they have a chance to fail. But if they keep all that under control, and then go all out, Super Mega Mode, and maybe even try to battleize and fuse into Gotenks while in these states, they'd be hypothetically adding a 5th and 6th Ranger to their team in one move. So now all they need to become the Ultimate Sentai Squad is a giant robot to pilot in a battle. And with this new power making Cell Mech such easy pickings for Gamma Goten and Gamma Trunks, they already have a good feeling about where to start on that project. But this is very obviously only scratching the surface of the question. If Yamato, or rather Tenzo, found himself reborn in the world of Naruto with all his memories and powers, he could also make a fascinating amount of integral changes by leveraging his protective intel and foreknowledge of things to come, like knowing the masterminds behind many long-time conspiracies, like Orochimaru, Danzo, Tobi, and Mamoru Uchiha, not to mention making use and further advancing his Anbu training and wood release, already obtained without need of experimentation at this second try at life, allowing him to essentially become Konoha's key pillar of defense and stability. To demonstrate what I mean, and very much in line with Tenzo's pragmatism, maturity, and discipline, the moment he is born incoherent, less conscious of his reincarnation, at least in terms of recognizing enough that this is overall the same events he had lived through once, I think he would generally just generate a wood clone as a perfect copy of his past adult self, leaf garden identification and all, and then he'll be able to warn the third Hokage about Orochimaru's human experiments, providing details that only an unwilling participant can know, as well as what he knows of Danzo's own conspiracy, or simply come completely clean about all he knows, should he feel that is the most direct and appropriate method to complete his mission. This might prompt earlier security sweeps of the research facilities, or Tenzo could just target Orochimaru's data itself to use as proof, since he knows the location of Orochimaru's secret labs, and likely a decent bit of the research data itself, using his stealth skills and wood release for structural infiltration alongside his clones. He could secure or destroy the vital data on forbidden jutsu, seals, and genetic experiments before Orochimaru could even use them effectively, as well as exposing any other criminal or illegal ties or dealings he may have, like with Danzo for instance. So with those two major issues out of the way, a plan to try and prevent Obito and the Nine-Tails attack could begin to take place, which could likely involve diverting the tragedy faced by Minato's Team 7 by providing them with intel or support, since he could certainly with reincarnated power and knowledge make a big difference at Kanabi Bridge. I also do want to point out that because of characters like Itachi, Kakashi, Konohamaru, and Naruto, it's totally plausible for someone super young, who wasn't even reincarnated, to already be operating at a Chunin or Jonin level, or even grown enough to visually be indistinguishable from older kids. So yes, reborn Yamato could definitely throw direct hands to change the plot too, likely seeing himself adopted into Team Minato, or possibly Team Kushina as an honorary member. Aside from this foresight that forces will still want to target the Nine-Tails, and that the birth of Naruto could still be dangerous, Yamato's wood release could be put to work further, masterfully expanding and fortifying the village, making it far sturdier for future events by creating things like barriers or underground bunkers, as well as just refurbishing and renovating the Hidden Leaf, while saving S-rank criminal amounts of money on lumber prices. With a robust and concealed defense system around Naruto's birth site, it is fully possible that the Naruto of this world wouldn't be forced to inherit a Jinchuriki status, at least not immediately anyway, with Kushina and Minato both surviving and going on to live and further secure their own legacies thanks to Tenzo's help, as well as saving many other lives in a compounding effect. No Nine-Tails attack or Danzo plotting means less Uchiha strife, granting a cozier life for both Naruto and Sasuke, with this being the trend all the way to the 4th Great Ninja War, not being nearly as hard since this timeline's Obito is likely still a Leaf Jonin, who is teamed up with powerful heavy hitters like Tenzo, Guy, and Kakashi. Finally, Yamato definitely doesn't get captured, and thus watched to make an excuse for a massive white Zetsu army. What if Krillin stopped dying simply because he couldn't actually stay dead? If Krillin became undead, or a zombie, or any other kind of adjacent creature of the night, whose most significant trait is an undead fortitude, is mostly a scenario born from both spooky Halloween-themed ideas of Dragon Ball what-ifery, but also a play on the frequent run-ins with death Krillin has had throughout the series. Even though in the grand scheme of things, Krillin hasn't actually died all that much more than anybody else. But even so, he remains the series poster boy for the concept of mortality, I'd say. The other thing that makes such a concept interesting is that there are simply so many different forms of undeath, with many having different abilities and powers through their different lores and mythologies, like the thralls, ghouls, and lesser bloodsuckers spawned by vampires, for example. And with the nature of Dragon Ball, Ki, and its transformations and high ceilings of power, it somewhat implies that an undead Krillin could at least theoretically approach his afterlife in a manner that is more in line with something like existential evolution from undead unwanted adventurer, seeing Krillin maybe start off as a low-level skeleton revived by dark magic, with the hidden ability to ascend and evolve up through stronger undead forms, clawing his way higher and higher in the ranking of power, until becoming something unrecognizable, like a Lich King for example. Or he could approach it more from an undead unluck style, in order to do things like supercharging regenerative abilities, and turning a state of near immortality, or at least being able to not die, into a weapon itself, through things such as super pressurizing and weaponizing your own blood, or launching your body parts to do rocket punches and such, inspired by Android 16. Speaking of the androids and cyborgs, a Krillin like this could probably bond, deal with, and negotiate with the artificial and cybernetic humans, far better than it would do in canon, as there are some forms of undeath that are directly linked to mechanical augmentation, or a reliance on natural energy, like the power of a thunderstorm and lightning strikes. And beyond even this, the future timeline decimated by the androids may be one of the best places to explore this kind of idea, as it's already grim and dark, and holds one of Krillin's most tragic deaths in the franchise. In the end, an undead Krillin wouldn't just be a punchline, he'd become an even better symbol of persistence than in canon, as here, it'd be taken to its ultimate and most intense form. The man who's died the most will become the man who can't die at all. Maybe he'd rise above mortals and monsters alike, a being whose ki no longer burns with life, but with sheer unyielding willpower. In a way, turning Death's favorite victim into its master, a twist even Shenron would think twice about granting, but I'm just reckless enough to ask. If all of the Raikage were reborn with all of their memories and powers, could also be one of these prompts that could hold enough water for deeper exploration through its multiple generations. Since, just to be kind of honest, the Cloud has always been overtly the weirdest and most inconsistent village in the Naruto verse, meaning changes to address that are always pretty welcome, especially since a story like this could easily encompass a great deal of Cloud Ninja and Land of Lightning characters with simply cool designs and concepts that we never dove all that deep into, like Kinkaku and Ginkaku, Bluebeam, Omoi, Kataui, Samui, C, and a decent few others, as a setup like this could also allow for more exploration of the structure of the Cloud itself, and concepts like the village not really relying all too heavily on clans or Kekkei Genkai outside of a few of their ninja, and the single time we know of when they had a state-mandated mission to kidnap a little girl. The Cloud, like the Stone and Mist, is commonly themed as a bit more militaristic and power-hungry than the Leaf usually is, but simultaneously, by the era of peace between wars, the series eventually turns around and presents them as pretty progressive and inclined towards peace, as the Cloud even has one of the least abusive views and policies towards their Jinchuriki, at least compared to a lot of the other major nations. And this is to say nothing of Kumogakure's deeper unexplored culture, advanced tech and weaponry, and even their impressive techniques and uses of those weapons and tech, or even just their basic use of lightning chakra, since so many of the nation possess it. Thus, I believe if reborn, the first A would likely reflect on his life, and especially the first 5 Kage summit, founding of the Cloud, and the first Shinobi World War, not necessarily defying his own proud nature, but instead adapting it. We at least know he'd want to see how the village he founded evolved beyond the point of his death, possibly too proud and skeptical of Hashirama's desire for peace though he may be. So the first A might clash ideologically with other and newer Kage about reliance on alliances instead of their raw power initially, but ultimately he could do things like approach the first Hokage in his attempts to capture the Nine Tails of the Gold and Silver Brothers, having the task be made ultimately easier for both villages, and as an added bonus, they could reasonably conclude as Minato did later on, that splitting the beast in half by its yin and yang chakra would be more fair for peace efforts and safer overall. It could also discourage or even prevent Kinkaku and Ginkaku's future coup attempt, since they'd be successful and rewarded with power, and likely even Elder Council status for their efforts, making them powerful aids and arms to the political expertise of the Second Raikage, while also having a far stronger alliance with the Leaf, and especially Tobirama, as this means he would live possibly as long as Hiruzen did, which could be a blessing in disguise, and possibly soften his heart, influencing Danzo, and reducing internal strife in the Leaf as well. Meanwhile, the extra Jinchuriki and Tail Beast quelling experience, and growth from reincarnation as well, would benefit the third A and Blue B immensely, eliminating the berserk rampages of Eight Tails that colored their rule, and faster learn to harmonize with Gyuki, seeing the two go on to live longer in their own right, and mentor their successors who would also benefit from the growth during the time. While the fourth A would likely reflect on his prior life to be less of a hard ass, and take advantage of the close relationship with the Leaf to befriend and properly be a rival to Minato, and possibly to intermingle the blood of their hidden villages more naturally and peacefully, helping be the Jinchuriki as well as efforts to stop the Akatsuki from forming. Then by the era of Datoi's rule, he'd be prepared for the Otsutsuki, and cool-headed and wise enough to allow Boruto a safe haven in the Land of Lightning to train in, as his father was by the era of the Two Blue Vortex, though this lightning only strikes the surface of. If Yamcha became a werewolf is an oddly common and fun idea in the dark esoteric circles of Dragon Ball whatever, as it comes up from time to time as a side effect in other stories. It's a concept very likely born from a weird myriad of things, such as Yamcha's signature Wolf Fang Fist technique, an original cool long own wolf characterization pretty intrinsically linking him to wolves. But beyond this is the fact that parts of the werewolf trope are scratched on by the Saiyan's Uzara transformation as well. And we should all know by now how popular and interesting an idea it is to turn Yamcha into a Saiyan as well. Above all else though, one of the bigger reasons would likely be the fact that lycanthropy does just exist in the lore of Dragon Ball, even outside its references and mechanics of Saiyans. As back in OG Dragon Ball's second tournament, we not only met the Wolfman, who just literally was a classic monster-style werewolf, as if he were actually meant to be another one of Baba's fighters. But beyond this, when we later get to Daima and the demon world, we actually get to see that there are demons there. Whether it's a result of magic or not is never specified. But even on top of this, Universe 9 has its furry bait anthropomorphic wolf fighters, the Trio de Danger, and they are quite commonly referred to by the fanbase as the werewolves or wolf people themselves. And beyond that, they also have very interesting fighting styles and special gimmicks, like super energy suppression, generating poisonous ki, and altering their sizes independent of techniques like spear control. Also in Dragon Ball Heroes, there is a species almost identical to the Trio de Danger style of werewolf, and they are also capable of shapeshifting, not unlike Oolong and Puar, which I also think is a very fitting power for Yamcha lore-wise to use. As a result of all this, there are likely different routes to attain the powers of, or even become like other werewolves, as a form of powering up, thus giving Yamcha a way to enhance himself as a fighter, which in all fairness, almost every other major character has some form of doing in the series, as even Krillin received a pseudo-new form by facing his fears in the Super anime. Like most lycanthrope transformations, this would likely entail an increase in size and basic strength and speed. However, also per their lore, werewolves also have heightened senses and instincts in combat that may interact well with ki sense, in order to give a fighter an even greater perception skills and true sight. Beyond this, werewolves also have minor healing factors, meaning Yamcha would be far harder to put into his iconic death pose in this state. Of course, there are also potential downsides, like bloodlust and a loss of self-control. However, I think with the nature of meditation, image training, or spirit control, I don't think it's impossible to tame the inner beast and master this power. Therefore, my conclusion is that this one isn't bad at all as a what if, even without the lens of being a very good spooky month story more so than just a regular one. It's just that there's a surprising amount of meat on the bone of this story to chew on and explore. But what do you think about the wacky, or eerie, concept of asking what would happen if Kisame Hoshigaki and the other ninja swordsmen of the mist were reborn with all their memories and powers, would both offer a really interesting chance to deeper explore Kisame specifically, but also, as mentioned when speaking on the idea of reincarnation of Zabuza Momochi and the Mizukage, as it would also offer a greater exploration into the hidden mist village itself and other things like Kenjutsu as an art form and discipline of the Naruto world, or chakra enhanced or enchanted weaponry in ways that we've just yet to. Kisame specifically is interesting because I think with what we see of his end as an Akatsuki member, his loyalty could mean he would strictly be interested in advancing the agenda and the desires of Madara and the Akatsuki itself. But I actually think it's just as possible to have this played in the route that Kisame's loyalty and priorities may become a bit more selfish in his second life, possibly focusing on the desire to deepen his bond with Itachi and going out of his way to defect from the mist in order to save him from his illness and the evil machinations surrounding the Uchiha and the mist. And with a full second lifetime to get stronger and foresight of the future, there really isn't very much the tailless tailed beast couldn't pull off, since Zabuza has been covered beforehand. And to explore the other characters being reincarnated, we can mention Juzo Biwa next, who with reincarnation likely wouldn't die, at least if he chose not to change his fate too much, and thus would remain Itachi's Akatsuki partner even past their battle with Yagura, also changing the course of Zabuza's life. Or Juzo too could find a brighter path with his rebirth, working to reform and improve the mist and the land of water alongside the other swordsmen, serving as possibly a special forces leader, while someone like Samehada's original owner, Fuguki Sukazan, could focus on the village's defenses and counterintelligence methods to improve internal security and to fairly address dissent within the land of water. Knowing how Kisame betrayed him could make him pretty paranoid, but that kind of paranoia and vigilance could be just what's needed to avoid threats like Obito's infiltration, while opposite to him, Jinin Nakabino as the wielder of the Kabuto Wari could focus on anti-defense and breaking enemy barriers, and working with him as an artillery and demolition expert, Jinpachi Manada, with his sword that combines explosions with slicing power, would revolutionize the mist warfare further. His knowledge would allow him to develop deadly, large-scale explosive tactics, and perhaps even new sealing methods to make his blast portable and untraceable. He would be the chief engineer of destruction, tasked with developing super weapons to flatten enemy strongholds, and making him the ultimate terrorist threat against fortified villages like Iwagakure. Though Kushimaru Kuriarare is known for his twisted, sadistic joy in killing with his piercing sewing needle sword Nuibari, reborn, he will be the head of Kirigakure's enhanced interrogation and assassination division, and whether using Raiga Kurosaki or Amayuri Ringo as your Kiba sword wielder, you would gain an elemental and speed specialist who could serve strong roles acting as teachers to young ninja, making most hidden myths ninja masters of changes in chakra nature, and then applying those changes with kin or buki jutsu. Also, a reborn Amayuri could possibly cure a disease, going on to change the timeline further by just surviving, or maybe even having a kid by one of the other ninja swordsmen. Finally, Mangetsu Hozuki is our final most interesting member, as the natural leader and Mizukage candidate of the reborn group, possessing the intelligence, political ambition, and technical skill to manage the village, which could help him unite all of Kiri under a new common goal they can flow their will of water towards, chief of which being not to get cocky and run the ones that might die. If Tien became a demonic sorcerer is an extremely interesting and wild twist on the usual approaches that are taken for stories about focusing on Tien Shinhan's growth amongst the Z-Fighters, and exploring his third eye in connection to the three-eyed people, who we know so little about, as well as connecting and balancing that connection with some of the ideas we learned from Daima, like the significance of third eyes to demonkind and their culture and history. While on top of this, Tien has always been one of the most disciplined and spiritual characters in Dragon Ball, rooted deeply in his martial arts, meditation, and self-control. But turning him into a demonic sorcerer, or maybe even a warlock, would invert that somewhat though. He'd be channeling a forbidden energy, possibly to transcend his mortal limits, or to protect others from something far greater. And as a sorcerer, he would also therefore have the potential and power of a more notable ancestors and patrons to call on the abilities and wisdom of. Since for all we know, Tien's eye could be something as small as a signature phenotypical feature of a certain species. On the other hand, the third eye could be a literal mark of a very ancient demonic entity, maybe the ones who created the evil third eyes, and gave or made them for the original Supreme Demon Kings, who Dabura's father was amongst the number of. Beyond this, magic and ki aren't the same in Dragon Ball, meaning this kind of change would also be opening up Tien to become a kind of mystic fighter, akin to Piccolo, capable of utilizing both magic and ki alongside martial arts, to achieve things along the lines we see Babidi or Moro do. This could also make Tien something like an unofficial Demon King, or at least one of the strongest contenders for the throne, leading to earlier Demon Realm antics quite possibly. And on top of even that, this would also increase the effectiveness of Tien's support for his friends, and bolster his defense of the planet Earth, likely allowing him to buff or help fighters like Chaozu through magic or ki techniques, letting him do things like power his little buddy up into a hopping vampire or a zombie, in ways very similar to how we propose for Undead Krillin, or maybe even studying the same things that characters like Goma have in order to learn how to make his own evil third eyes, which could then be shared amongst allies to power them up as well. In the end, a demonic sorcerer Tien could easily stand atop the power scales of the rivals he respects most, being considered neither saint nor demon, but something in between, with his third eye evolved to always blaze like a crimson sun, going even further beyond the power even Goma or the other demon kings have achieved. I honestly do think it's a great idea for a Tien story. Having turned away from both gods and devils and walking his own path makes me really want to consider further if Granny Chiyo and other village elders like Koharu Utatane and Homura Mitokato would mean some of the most entrenched, traditionalist, and politically powerful figures coming back into the forefront of the timeline, and the story of Naruto with all their influence, specific jutsu, and most importantly, all their regrets and knowledge of how many of their past decisions led to disaster and failures, irrevocably changing the political, diplomatic, and military landscapes of the world far more than just the hidden sand or elite villages. Aside from how most characters can take advantage of the opportunity that is reincarnation, the greatest assets of a reborn village elder are their political acumen and the ability to operate outside the standard chains of command, now combined with future knowledge and the understanding of their prior path too, and the greater use of a higher position of authority. Chiyo herself, for example, has a pretty easy to predict course of action to take, since as a reborn puppet master and a medic nin and a poison specialist, she would have a great deal of memories and expertise from the wars she participated in, as well as a solid understanding of how to save Sasori's parents during war this time, preventing the more tragic and cold parts of his own fate and methods, which would also therefore save the life of the third Kazekage, and in general, would just save the Sen a lot of time, effort, and stress. On top of this, she would remember her rivalry with the medical prowess of Tsunade Senju, as well as how important the alliance with the Leaf Village will be one day, along with the fact that Gar will become a beacon of hope and unity for the ninja world, giving her a reasonable set of objectives to complete all these tasks, providing a better life for herself, her family, her country, and the ninja world as a whole. In this timeline, likely not needing to sacrifice herself for Gar's sake, and thus surviving a lot longer with this second shot at life. While on the exact opposite hand, or maybe creating a sort of spectrum if we want to have a more optimistic view of things, since I could pretty easily see elders like Koharu or Homura either not learning a damn thing from their shockingly long first lives, as these two have lived well into the Boruto era, and even the reign of the 7th and 8th Hokage. They could just double down and simply help Danzo in his schemes and plots, ushering in a pretty hellish and bleak timeline like the one we discussed with him. If they, however, are smart or selfless enough to recognize Danzo as a liability whose actions led to the Uchiha massacre and repeated disasters for the Leaf, it could wind up as a timeline where Danzo is virtually purged from political power, while steps are taken to ensure the second Hokage could possibly survive on longer as well. Along with this, as some of the highest ranking Leaf Village elders, or at least as they will go on to be, they could pretty easily and almost single-handedly push to see a reconciliation for the village with the Uchiha clan and better treatment of the Jinchuriki of the Land of Fire, ensuring Naruto Uzumaki, alongside the whole of the Uchiha, is valued as a future leader and a contributing member of the community. And in the process, decisions like this could avert multiple invasions, coup d'etats, and even the complete falls of some nations like Uzugakure. Not to mention, an earlier response to Madara and the Akatsuki, and much like Granny Chiyo would prioritize, a focus on ensuring stability and a solid foundation for the next generation, rather than just a push towards change for the sake of it. If Chilled had survived, it likely would have changed the entire state of Universe 7 quite drastically, far before figures like Frieza or Goku even got to make their first impacts on the timeline. In the source material, Frieza and King Cold's wicked bloodline has always been depicted as extremely durable, and just kind of blessed with a strong life force, alongside their immense power, despite their overt disdain for life itself. This is especially true when we expand from the strict canon timeline to consider the feats of figures like Cooler in the movies, or even the fact that Chilled's death from the wounds given to him by Super Saiyan Bardock in the OVA came after the battle itself. So the idea of a universe where the father of King Cold survives his run-in with the Super Saiyan isn't all too extremely far-fetched, and narrative-wise, it presents the dark intrigue of exploring a world where Frieza and his ilk not only may not be as scared of the Saiyans, but instead, their newfound wariness born through experience would just further birth more adaptations in the Imperial Dynasty of the universe, advancing Frieza's race militarily, diplomatically, and biologically. For another thing, I can honestly see the Chilled of this universe being willing to initially do whatever he could to avoid truly being overpowered as the strongest in the universe, even if it meant outside aid, or experimenting with ways to unlock a transformation of his own, whether through cybernetic augmentation or forced mutation, turning Chilled into a closer Proto-Frieza-like figure, which in and of itself would be majorly consequential, as this would overall mean a stronger and more prepared Chilled clan, with King Cold being raised and possibly trained or modified to counter Super Saiyans himself, while also being pushed to make sure he has more than a single heir to protect the dynasty, likely ensuring Cooler's canonicity in such a dark timeline, and furthermore, could even result in Cooler and Frieza having their own children in the vein of Kuriza rather quickly, as the best part of all this for the clan is that as soon as King Cold takes over full-time duties, Grandpa Chilled can look after the children and grandchildren to ensure that they are raised to be bigger, stronger, and more strategic, likely teaching them explicitly how to deal with and subjugate the Saiyans, rather than wiping them completely out, as overall, the likes of the Saiyans likely wouldn't be able to do much against such a force. That is, unless they themselves evolved quite rapidly and drastically, meaning things would eventually fall to the gods to put the Chilled clan in check. Though as far as that goes, that is just as likely to make Chilled a deputized and even possible candidate for the next god of destruction of Universe 7, and in such a timeline, it would be well and truly earned. But this is only a taste of the dark and unnatural fallout that would result should a place in the multiverse exist where somehow Lord Chilled returns. If Itama, Kawurama, or any of the other underexplored members of the Senju clan were reborn with all their memories and powers, I think it would allow for the story of Naruto to fully deliver on the Senju as a whole's position in the series as a force capable of rivaling the Uchiha, as well as creating and mastering thousands of different techniques. The unabashed truth is simply that we know exceedingly little about Itama and Kawurama, like their abilities or potentially how strong they could have gotten. In fact, for all we know, there could be Senju clan techniques, hidden or otherwise, or just jutsu or even Kekkei Genkai, that they could have or would have devised or developed had they lived out longer lives like their brothers. During times of stress and warfare, are often when we see shinobi either awaken to before untapped potential or crack under the pressure after all. Thus, it's not necessarily an issue of them being too weak or uninteresting, more that Kishimoto really wanted to get across how brutally violent and certainly cruel the ninja world could be back then in the earlier days of shinobi, even compared to the modern day. The deaths of both brothers do prove that, but had the Senju formed a stronger four-man cell of brothers, what could have changed? In the original story, Kawurama's death was the catalyst for the brothers' first debate on the pointlessness of war, which in the end only separated Tobirama and Hashirama more. A reborn Kawurama, though, is no longer a victim. He is a veteran in a child's body, and considering he was stated to have outstanding talent for his age, at this time, even amongst his brothers, and ninja of the same age, he could most certainly do a lot with a second shot at life, and prior knowledge of what's going to happen for at least the first 7 years of it, likely taking on a survivalist or medical specialty in their clan, which just as a thought, could vastly bolster and accelerate Tsunade and all her student development later on, as a specific Senju medical corps would be developed decades before her birth. This role would also help him to support his clan and reduce casualties on the battlefield, while Itama, also having died young, returned to the drive to reach the potential he was denied. With future knowledge, he avoids and counters the Uchiha ambush that killed him, and then works hard to develop into a master of the Senju's versatile elemental jutsu, or possibly to focus more on developing Senju-style kin or Buki jutsu, since his brothers would truly only dabble in the art of the blade, where he could define himself fully by it. it, and that's something he can give back to and teach to family. So as Butsuma Senju would witness his child with possibly the most untapped potential displaying commendable tactical awareness worthy of a ninja twice his age or more, and his youngest and possibly weakest son striving hard to make himself strong enough to be heard in this world, I think the clan leader would see forth to back their decisions and slowly prepare them more and more for leadership roles, and then look to them for input and insight far more often and with significantly more faith and trust, re-evaluating his own harsh traditions for the Senju and his aspirations for the shinobi world. Despite the fact that this Hachirama's idealism would be born of success and first-hand seeing collectivism work for the Senju, while this version of Tobirama would be somewhat softened and better balanced by the Uchiha not brutally slamming out two of his little brothers when he was just a little kid. Because of this, and the fact Kawaraman and Itama can provide intel on which Uchiha clansmen are open to peace, or could even create them by going out of their way to spare and save their enemies, as they avoid every ambush with 100% accuracy, the alliance with the Uchiha happens faster and with less blood spilled on both sides, thus taking on a heavier burden with reincarnation instead of being names on a memorial stone. The two often forgotten brothers become the intelligence and medical heads of the nascent Konoha. If Ox King really had the 900 power level from the Tree of Might movie pamphlet, he would hands down be the strongest human to have ever lived during the run of OG Dragon Ball, and likely well into early portions of Z, considering the fact that he did not train or engage in any combat that would increase his power since beating Goku, meaning he would have had his strength throughout the series. As a result, it is wholly possible that Goku would choose to train under him rather than Master Roshi following the peel-off arc, if not at the very least making his future father-in-law his rival, while also growing closer to Chi-Chi, who might be motivated to train, even enter the World Martial Arts Tournament in this timeline. Or, the situation could become one where Chi-Chi, wanting to prove herself and get both their father and Goku's attention, decides to run away from home and become Roshi's student alongside Krillin. Either way, he will be instrumental in fighting off the Red Road Army alongside Goku's other friends during the later section of their arc, and upon learning of King Piccolo's return, Ox King would do what Roshi couldn't, and with his entrusted will and Turtle School might, he would either reseal the Demon King, or else put an end to him permanently, when he attempts to reconquer the world with his sinister spawn. Thanks to this latter option, there would be no Piccolo Jr. arc, though fortunately, Goku wouldn't get complacent, as he would still have a long way to go to surpass Ox King, and thanks to likely still marrying Chi-Chi, he would have plenty more chances to train and spar with his mentor and father-in-law during the time skip. Since this early version of the Son family we got to experience so little of would probably be more close-knit than most versions of it throughout the multiverse. As a result, he would be pretty close to or above Ox King's power, or at the very least, stronger than himself in canon by the time Raditz shows up. And upon hearing that this alien brute kidnapped his grandson, Grandpa Ox will be at Goku's side, with their combined powers being enough to end Raditz without the need for sacrifice. Subsequently, he would join the others in training for the arrival of the Saiyans, with his utility as a very powerful training partner being the rising tide that carries all the others up, so that when they do confront Vegeta and Nappa, there are fewer casualties, while also resulting in a likely more powerful and more self-assured Gohan trained by his grandpa and dad. Sadly, it is around here that things would start to return to canon, as being human, Ox King's relevance would steadily decrease. But thankfully, through his own strength and determination, he will be able to successfully ferry the heroes through the problem losing their Dragon Balls his strength originally creates. And as a benevolent and true king, he would always be ready to lend a hand and be a reminder of what training and perseverance can achieve. If Izuna and the Uchiha clan were reborn with all their memories and powers, even if we do exclude the other Uchiha we've covered so far, it would still be a concept that fundamentally alters the entire history and future of the Naruto world. The rebirth of Izuna Uchiha, Madara's younger brother, a co-founder of the clan's legacy, and a prodigious Mangekyo Sharingan user in his own right, alongside the entire Uchiha clan, all retaining their memories and powers, changes everything from the Uchiha-Senju rivalry to the final conflicts from the Senju-Uchiha rivalry to the final conflicts of the ninja world, as the Sharingan wielders would now have an even more unprecedented advantage. As our primary focus, Izuna's role after he returns would be as a fully realized Mangekyo Sharingan wielding contemporary of Madara and Hashirama, or rather, he would seek to go beyond them. His core loyalty is still to Madara and the Uchiha clan, but now he would have prehistorical clarity to understand the dangers of Madara's extremism, and to at least some extent, the threat Zetsu and his meddling poses to his bond with Madara and the future of the clan, as well as the ninja world itself. Beyond this, thanks to the clan's reincarnated memory and strength, the first generations of reborn Uchiha would collectively remember the first Great Ninja War, the political manipulation by the other villages, and the tragedy of the Konoha setup, with this eliminating any naivete on their part. And with their precognitive Kekkei Genkai advantage being further developed, this will result in a fully powered clan with dozens, if not hundreds of elite Sharingan users, civilian and shinobi alike, transforming them into the world's preeminent military force, as the clan may also make a wise decision to not gather themselves on the Land of Fire or Konoha itself, dispersing themselves amongst the nations as impartial and unbiased people who simply desire places of their own to call home, and bonds of different people with the goal of turning the Uchiha scourge of hatred into a blessing of passion and brotherhood throughout the ninja world, so that the sacrifices and hardships of their descendants and Madara need not be faced with this timeline, seeing the clan therefore rally behind Izuna as he becomes the strongest, and knowing the outcome of the Senju alliance, and preventing the death of Itama Senju as a means of securing peace earlier, and also pushing him to form friendly ties with the Uzumaki, and then the other great nations and clans after this. Izuna would work tirelessly to secure a peaceful existence in this life for himself and the other Uchiha, living on a long time to become a clan and then village elder, with feats like securing Shisui and the Kotoamato Kami, preventing the death of the second Hokage, and the extremism of Danzo and Madara, and providing unrivaled intelligence, and perfect but by no means overstepping its boundaries defense for the world, courtesy of the Uchiha Military Police and Salvation Army Corps, with these two living up into modern day and in non-corrupted form as well, thus providing a viable means to avoid the Sasuke problem and many other issues later in the series, as the crimson pinwheel eyes of the Uchiha clan watch over the world, ever wary of the kinds of injustices that led to their fate in the original timeline. If Spike the Devilman trained Mr. Satan, he could go from a self-aggrandizing buffoon to the sort of hero he claims to be. There are several ways this could occur, such as a young Hercule coming across Baba's palace and believing himself strong enough to beat her fighters, only to get his ass handed to him. Or else, Spike could be drawn to the Satan Castle dojo for using his iconography, while also being so weak and inexperienced in the true demonic ways. Kinda like in my What If Bardock's Family Escaped to Earth story. Check out the suggested video if you're interested. Either way, Spike would be a strict master, making sure Mr. Satan possessed no evil in his heart, as he knows what a dangerous thing that can be. He would also instill the utmost respect and dedication for the martial arts into the young man, as a two-time world tournament champion himself, something the ambitious Hercule would admire and long to emulate, which would in turn give he and Spike a true bond of master and disciple. Nonetheless, Spike would also indulge his student's flair for the dramatic, having a bit of one himself, meaning Mr. Satan would still have a bit of that goofy and theatrical ego we all know and love. Finally, at the completion of Hercule's training, Spike would entrust him with the secret of the Devilmite Beam, and how to use it to smite any evildoer, so long as they have even a modicum of darkness and malice in their heart. Luckily, or maybe unluckily, Hercule would get plenty of opportunities to test this, depending on when we set such a story. If placed in the classic Dragon Ball era, I could easily see a lot of fun being had by throwing the fortune teller Baba fighters alongside the Devilman's new protege of young Mark Satan into the 22nd Budokai Tenkaichi, alongside the Turtle and Crane schools, giving these characters and plots a chance to shine by adding a few more funny and cool fights, better highlighting the growth of the Turtle School after the fortune teller Baba saga, highlighting how little evil truly hides in the hearts of antagonists like Ten Shinhan and Chaozu, while being extremely helpful if not critical against real big bad bosses like King Piccolo and Jr. Or, if we were to hold back until the time skip to Z, we could maybe start as early as Vegeta and Nappa's arrival, seeing a new candidate for the Z fighters coming in as a clutch assist after learning about the aliens' destruction of East City, not too dissimilar to the unexpected help what if from Budokai Tenkaichi 3. This would allow Mr. Satan to join our heroes, where he would be instrumental in defending against the Saiyans and maybe fighting Frieza. Though even if he does not and we hold him back even longer, he would certainly be present for the Cell games, and thanks to the Bio-Android's wicked heart, all it would take is one Devilmite Beam to completely destroy him, if not put him in a state of checkmate constantly, meaning that in this timeline, when he receives accolades for defeating Cell, they will be well earned. However, the real intrigue further becomes the implications this Hercule's power, limit breaks, and training would have on him in the story of Dragon Ball, moving into the Buu saga, Daima, Super, or even GT. Would he still meet Miguel and have Videl? And just how terrifyingly strong would she become with her Uncle Devilman virtually acting as her own Mr. Piccolo, tutoring her in martial arts, and to harness demonic power as well if not better than Son Gohan was taught. Seriously, don't sleep on this devilishly good idea. I think there's some real intrigue hiding in a concept I got from a card gag in DBZ, but what do you think? If Ashina and the rest of the Uzumaki clan of the Hidden Whirlpool Village were reborn with all their memories and powers, it would very much be a seeming repeat of many of the other scenarios in this series we have covered, especially when speaking either at the clan level or about anyone with sealing or defensive abilities, which could really be taken advantage of when paired with knowledge of the future, allowing them to make great swathing changes and prevent tragedies that befell them originally. But I think in this case, it is magnified a fairly significant amount, like most other things about the Uzumaki, as they'd obviously rewrite and likely idealize the founding of Konoha, the nature and treatment of Jinchuriki, and the ultimate outcome and course of ninja warfare and development. Ashina is one of the foremost patriarchs of the clan, and a contemporary of the first Hokage, as our point character also makes a lot of sense, as he'd be returning with some pretty supreme knowledge and understanding of sealing jutsu from his prior life, which would only be further grown, evolved, and refined with a second lifetime, started at level 100 rather than 0. And it really becomes even more baffling to think about how strong Ashina and the original generations of Uzumaki could become, considering certain factors like the clan's longevity and strong life force, as well as things like the adamantine chain technique being said to get stronger with time and age. Thus, there would already be many amongst the clan whose chains had been honed over the course of a single lifetime, which in itself would probably birth its own evolution to the technique. Think something along the lines of yokai like Nekomata and Kitsune evolving after 100 years. And speaking of, having even stronger chains than the ones that could hold down Nine Tails, the Uzumaki Uzumaki of this timeline would be even further established as world superpowers, simply because a single one of their abilities now has a much higher skill ceiling than before. Beyond this, the Uzumaki will be coming back with memories of their destruction at the hands of multiple villages, as well as the secrets of the tailed beasts, a great deal of which could also help them identify the future threats imposed by conspiring organizations like the Akatsuki under Zetsu's influence, or even Kata. As a result, I think Ashin would set his sights higher and become a more proactive character, possibly taking on a campaign to unite the Land of Fire himself and conscripting the likes of Madara, Hashirama, and possibly even the younger brothers, including Itama, considering the Uzumaki clan's ability to heal severe injuries as well, putting an earlier and more peaceful end to the Uchiha-Senju rivalry, and establishing the Leaf as the first members of the we'll say Whirlpool Alliance. The end goal being to become a more neutral and diplomacy-based organization like the Samurai. As a result, the ninja world itself would likely remain at least somewhat more peaceful, especially for the Uzumaki, as they thrive and likely continue to spread out amongst the world a bit more organized and welcomed by all. Meanwhile, I think it's possible that the use of tail beasts' weapons wouldn't become all that popular, and instead it would be negotiated with the tail beasts to serve a kind of role like deities, or more like guardians of great power in a way, forming sources of clean free energy the entire world utilizes fairly through complex Uzumaki seals, while the Uzumaki themselves would become a clan almost regarded like magic wielders, whose sole purpose and dedication would often be acting like stewards or sages of the shrines to these beings, allowing the tailed beasts to go into a more peaceful existence as almost myths or legends. The ninja world only falling back into ruin and endless cycles of hatred and pain, should the importance of the tale of Ashin and the Uzumaki be fully forgotten by the presumably more secretive ninja of the modern day in such a timeline. But that may genuinely be a Naruto what-if story of its own for another time. To prove I've done my best to completely exhaust this topic beyond what was asked of me, plus ultra, let's do a lightning round to wrap up the remaining miscellaneous major named characters of Naruto being reborn with all their memories and power. For instance, Ebisu isn't a powerhouse like Madara or Hashirama, but his role as the elite tutor means his influence is exponential, since he could have major impacts for other major players, like helping Naruto master chakra control earlier, or Konohamaru to capitalize on his full potential better, as well as protecting the Leaf from threats like Orochimaru and Pain. A similar status goes for Izumo and Kotetsu, who with reborn prowess could become powerful but quiet assets to the Leaf, as its eternal gatekeepers, using their intel and synergy to clean up the Chunin exams, bar Kabuto from entry and spying, and provide crucial support and intel during the Akatsuki suppression and Pain invasion, saving many lives like Asuma in its own butterfly effect. A reborn Genma Shiranui would also have major impacts they may be initially overlooked, considering his position in the series has let him gather crucial data on major conspiracies in the world, like the Akatsuki, while his prowess is that of a ninja who can kill with nothing but a sin bone used as a toothpick, and who was sanctioned to be a part of the 4th Hokage's elite guard. With a second shot at things, he could become the new Kakashi of the timeline, winding up as not only Naruto's master, but also playing a major role in stopping the Konoha Crush, Sasuke's defection, in the 4th Great Ninja War. Or consider a reborn Might Dai, who could rapidly transform himself from something of a joke to the Hidden Leaf's most powerful secret weapon, and an open and proud candidate for the role of Hokage, capable of single-handedly decimating and capturing all 7 ninja swordsmen and their powerful weapons, developing an heir who can surpass him in Guy, as well as totally redefining and raising the bar of taijutsu as an art form entirely. Also a part of the Hokage Guard Squad, and a character I have only seen given time to shine in my What If Zabuza Survived story, Raido Namiyashi would also be interesting to reincarnate, mostly because of his skill set and his Kokuto or Black Blade, and using that weapon's poisons, and Raido's prior knowledge of his enemies, and their unique biologies possessed by the likes of Kisame, Hidan, or Zetsu, would mean he could craft poison specifically to counter and eliminate said major threats. As in this timeline, when they encounter him, the Sound Four are all paralyzed, and then captured, interrogated, and removed from the board entirely, as Sasuke stays in Konoha none the wiser, and the Akatsuki suppression and war are breezed through, as the Leaf becomes a poison death trap for its enemies. If Aoba Yamashiro were reborn, the Leaf's intelligence would become nearly unstoppable and rather bold. Not to mention, with a second chance, he could correct big mistakes like letting it slip to Sasuke of Itachi's presence in the village, while his crows and mind-reading ability would get stronger, meaning threats like Kabuto are snuffed out, and Kisame never gets to send intel back to the other Akatsuki, thanks to a tight-lipped spy master. While looking at a different village for a moment in this lightning round, if Samui, Kadoi, and Omoy are reborn with their memories, Kumogakure becomes the first village to effectively shut down the Akatsuki's movements in the Land of Lightning, and forms a powerful alliance with the Samurai and the Leaf very early on, as they accomplish goals like ambushing Kakuzu and Hidan to save Yukito, detecting Kisame inside Samehade early, and making earlier and better use of the treasure tools. Finally, if Teuchi, the owner of the Ramen Gun and the most powerful of the series, were to get a second shot at life, I think he'd make an interesting tale when he returns as the moral grounding of the Leaf. If a part had permanently joined Sakamoto's, or perhaps we should use the term survived until a real confirmation of its death or survival is given, I think it'd be rather interesting for a setup for a Sakamoto Days alternate universe. While for sure, there is another redhead the series could have stood to spend far more time and focus focus on, considering her significance in Taro Sakamoto's family and friends, as well as the fact that Apart, specifically as the big bad of the Escape Death Row Inmates arc, and a character confirmed to have caught over 200 bodies, many of which likely innocent to some degree or another. He may not be the first antagonist from the series one thinks of considering the villain turned good concept for whatever, but I think these unique traits make him more enticing to keep around. First off, just consider that simply disappearing in the invasion of the JAA by Slur, Gaku, and Uda isn't the most satisfying way Apart's story could have continued, or ended, since we see directly after defeating him, Taro seems open to giving him a chance at redemption. And in the grand scheme of things, the story being about assassins, most of our heroes have killed a lot of people in general, and most of them are much more sound of mind than Apart when they did so. So simply having taken life should not be a disqualification for being a hero in this story. Besides this, the extra hands, and yes it would be hands plural, since he would likely be able to have his arm reattached, as we see with Gaku's ear and Mr. Takamura's arm. Thus, having a part in the story longer would have been greatly appreciated by the heroes, especially near the new JAA arc, and the war efforts against Slur and the New Order, since for a great deal of those events, they are outnumbered and on the back foot, whereas here, their number of combatants and ability to lay traps and control battlefields increases pretty significantly. Not to mention, Apart could accompany Shin during the test portion of the JCC infiltration arc, while Sakamoto stays home and preps to pose as a teacher instead of a student, saving Taro from wasting his time, while also making the arc more dependent on Apart, Shin, and the other exam takers to surpass their limits, which could also change a lot of the later events of the story, like the Bangkok, Assassin Exhibition, and jail arcs. And beyond all this, simply as an employee, Apart's perfectionism, bordering on OCD, would make he too one of the world's most efficient and terrifying convenience store clerks. Using his skill and proficiency with nigh invisible steel threads, he could restock an entire aisle in seconds. If a single ramen cup was 1mm out of alignment, he'd probably have a minor breakdown and rewire the entire shelf, but it would still be incredibly quick and convenient. Shoplifters and enemy assassins wouldn't stand a chance. They'd find themselves stitched to the floor before they even reached the door for their weapons. And all the while, the honest job would be training Apart's social awkwardness and improving his ability to connect with people. Though even so, the beginning would be rough and disastrous, and would constantly require Lu and Shin to translate his peculiar compliments and comments as he adapts to non-lethal life, and especially the Sakamoto family no-kill rule. And as I've said, this is merely a single freight stream, just a taste, a fun first dip into Sakamoto's for a What If series, since even now, as the final saga seems to be unfolding, Apart's fate is still one of the biggest what ifs, with many curious whether he is really dead, or perhaps in hiding, or recovering at Granny Maya's clinic. One thing is for sure though, a what if story like this will let us see just how Apart will live up to that Sakamoto's apron he so nearly earned. If Bulk and Skull had somehow kept their Ranger powers and officially joined the Mighty Morphin team, the first team of Rangers would have likely set a lot of different precedents that in canon wouldn't be established until much later in the franchise, like a team with over 6 Rangers, or simply making purple and orange colors we'd always associate with Rangers, long before they were officially used in SPD and Jungle Fury. Beyond that, because of how interconnected the Zordon era was, the question would eventually come up of whether or not the duo would continue their work as, or at least supporting the Rangers, through the retirement of some of the original team, or the discovery and shift to the Zeo, Turbo, and eventually in space powers. As for what we can definitely say, it's fairly easy to conclude that an MMPR team with 8 Rangers on it would give Rita and Zed an incredibly hard time. And if we were to take the time, sit down, and analyze every episode in Monster of the Week with this setup, we'd more than likely find some point in which Rita, Zed, and their forces could have been defeated a lot earlier, changing the timeline and possibly having lasting effects on the morphing grid forever, as we could even easily see the power coins never retired in this continuity. Even if that doesn't happen, the dunder-headed duo could still serve well as support like Billy would become in the Zeo era, or perhaps by helping the Blue Centurion as fellow officers of the law in Turbo, since overall, a lot of the story would still be about taking them from bullies and turning them into heroes. Redemption, however, would only come through responsibility and selflessness, through going out of their bumbling personas a bit, and even taking training and mentorship from the more veteran Rangers diligently and openly. There would also likely be some tension and conflict with the other Rangers as growing pains, but the benefits of Bacon, Dawn, and Feather Dactyl power to form a Bulk Skull Megazord would make up for it, I'm sure. Another amazing aspect would be the two's position as not your typical material for Rangers, with very unorthodox and unique fighting styles. That could have a grand effect on future Ranger teams, also causing them to be a bit more open to new recruits and support. Like imagine Tommy going on to recruit Devin and Cassidy onto the Dino Thunder team, specifically because of his experience with Bulk and Skull. Or think far into the future, where heroes like Ziggy from RPM, or Boom from SPD, may be given their chances to shine much sooner. It's undeniable that Bulk and Skull's characters are as synonymous with the franchise as some of its most iconic Rangers and villains. So needless to say, despite seeming goofy on the outset, this only scratches the very surface of the power that will be discovered